Good morning. We are here on June 29th, 2023 at the Utah Division of Natural Resources. We are conducting the briefing meeting for the board meeting that is scheduled for this date. Three of us are here at 1594 West North Temple in Salt Lake City. I am Charles Holmgren. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Water Resources. And with us this morning, we have Blaine Ibsen from the Sevier River and Randy Crozier from Uinta Basin. Online, we have Dana Van Horn, who represents the Upper Colorado Basin, and Spencer Jones from the Lower Colorado Basin. So we're glad to have Dana and Spencer with us online, and we will get started with our briefing meeting. And just comment from me, moisture has been plentiful in my area of the state. I represent the Bear River Basin. Water flows have been very beneficial to us. We haven't started using storage water yet in the Bear River Basin. The crops are looking good, and a lot of grass and feed for livestock is being produced. The Bear River, I didn't happen to look at it this morning. I don't know if we've gotten down to a 1,000 cubic feet per second yet flowing into the Great Salt Lake, but we've been as high as 9,000 cubic feet per second in the last 2 months. So things are looking good that way.
Why don't you have Candace and introduce everybody who's on?
Okay, sure. I'd like to turn to the Director of Water Resources, Candace Hassenjager, and she would like to make some introductions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm Candace Hassenjager, Director at the Division of Water Resources. With us today, we have Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Todd Stoneley, Marisa Egbert, Ben Merritt, Ani Merrill, Russell Hadley, Tom Cox, Marty Bushman, and Shannon Clow taking minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And in the back behind the curtain, our AV crew, Carmen McDonald, Paul Gedge, Seth Majors, and Matt Morgan. We're grateful for them to make this possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hassenjager. Anything we need to hear from either our online board members or Blaine or Randy this morning? Things are looking good. I guess we will go into our discussion of agenda items that we will discuss in the regular meeting, and we will review them in the briefing meeting at this time. And do we need to go, Madam Director, to water supply update or just feasibility report?
Minutes first. Minutes first.
Oh, approval of minutes. Oh, geez.
No, just review them.
Yeah, approval or review of minutes. I did have a couple of small corrections, just typos, clarification that I'd like to submit, and they aren't substantive to the deliberation of the discussions. But I'll hand those over to Shannon when I get a minute.
Mr. Vice Chair, I had a few comments. This is Blaine. I had a few comments on the minutes. I already got with Shannon on them. My comments basically were on the summary of board actions on the election of the vice chair and the approval of the minutes. Suggested that we had who made the motion and what the motion was and who seconded it, but we didn't have the resolution that it was approved. All voted in favor of it on 2 and 3, and then on number 18 also the same story with those. So those were my main comments on the summary of board actions, and then in the actual board minutes the same comments applied. So I already got with Shannon and gave those suggestions for the minutes.
Thank you, Blaine, for checking on that. Mine were not that substantive, but I'll hand those over to Shannon when I get a minute. Randy, do you have any other any comments on the minutes? Okay, thank you. What about Dana and Spencer? Do you have any comments on the minutes?
I do not.
Very good. Shalane?
Yes, I just, Kyle had sent one via email. I don't know if you had seen it. I believe the board meeting minutes had a date of today instead of the May 11th meeting. So if you check that and if that needs to be corrected.
That is true.
Okay.
It says unapproved board meetings, June 29th.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, so that should be
needs to
the,
fixed.
yep, the May meeting.
The May
Okay.
meeting.
Kyle had pointed that one out via email, so
That's
just wanted to
correct.
mention that. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks to Kyle, and thanks for Shalane for bringing that to our attention. All right.
Mr. Chair or Vice Chair, would you like a motion to approve them?
Not in general meeting, we will approve them. We just are looking for corrections now before we get into the general meeting so that we can have them prepared for formal approval.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we don't need to go over the water supply. That's just for
General meeting? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, let's move forward with feasibility reports. Russell Hadley, we have RE 469 Grantsville Irrigation Company, Tooele County. Russell, if you will step forward, please.
Okay, how much detail do you want me to go through? Just the whole report? Okay, yeah. Okay, it's for Grantsville Irrigation Company. They serve 1,835 agricultural acres and 2,136 lawn and garden connections. They get the water from several creeks, it's stored in Grantsville Reservoir, and a small 25-acre-foot head pond. And there's two pressure zones in the city in this system, a high-pressure east side and a low-pressure west side. They're currently repaying two projects to the board right now. The project to construct Grantsville Reservoir and a 2001 project for about 4,000 feet of transmission lines, and both those projects will be repaid in 31 years. Okay, the applicant's high-pressure zones necessitates a lot of pressure reducer valves, and 3 of those PRVs have had numerous maintenance and performance problems. When the valves stick, farm risers and lines have blown. When the PRV at the top of the system sticks, PRV number 1, it causes a chain reaction on the lower PRVs. This causes pressure spikes up to 300 PSI on the lower elevation pipes and PRVs. On one of the lower PRV stations, number 3, blew out from a pressure spike and nearly flooded a few homes downstream. They're very concerned about the safety of this and, the threat to life and property. And so also these boxes are in the ground, very spooky to work on. PRVs are very heavy. One of these boxes is so small, I couldn't get down in it, I'll say that. You could not get 2 people down in that box if you had to pull the PRV. They've been maintaining them, rebuilding the PRVs every year or 2 years, but that still isn't enough to stop these valves from malfunctioning. One of the biggest problems is they've got a lot of moss that comes in, gets stuck in the needle valves and causes problems. And despite having filters on them to try to keep the moss out. Okay, they're requesting financial assistance from the board to replace all 3 of the pressure reducing valves with above-ground buildings, manifolds, isolation valves, telemetry controls and monitoring, and refurbishing the existing PRVs. The hydraulically operated PRVs will be replaced with electrically operated valves and telemetry to control and monitor them. Overhead access and cranes will be available to safely pull the valves out when needed. Okay, and there's going to be a future head pond added in the next couple of years, and that will come off of pressure valve number 1 at the top to reduce pressure fluctuations on the lower system. And a pipeline to supply that future pond will be installed as part of this project. Benefits of the project: it'll make operation and maintenance of the system safer and more manageable for the employees. It'll increase safety for the surrounding neighborhoods and reduce the company's liability for possible damages. Shown cost sharing and repayment, total project cost is estimated at $1,760,000, with the board providing 85% of that, or $1,496,000. Staff recommends the board authorize 85% of the cost, up to $1,496,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $58,000. That's staff's report.
Thank you, Russell.
Okay?
Do board members have comments or questions?
I
Randy?
just had a question. So when they're getting these 300-pound surges, is it just elevation that's causing that, or is it just the water hammer from the failure of the valve upstream?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, the
Okay.
reservoir's quite a ways up on the hill.
Yeah.
From PRV 1 down to 2 is a pretty good elevation drop, couple
It
hundred
looked
feet.
like you're talking almost 700 feet of drop, and I
Yes.
just didn't know on the map if that
Yes.
was truly what there was.
From the top to the bottom. And
Okay.
so if that number 1 sticks, yeah, it'll send.
Just,
So it's a problem, both the elevation drop and the valve sticking.
so I don't blame them for wanting to get them above ground and
Yeah.
get them out of those vaults,
Yeah.
because,
Confined spaces.
yeah, those are ugly things to, and I assume they're doing redundant valves, double valves in each of those buildings.
Yes.
If they're not, they sure ought to be considering it.
They
so you
already
could
do
switch over.
have some backups installed now.
Okay,
Yeah, and when they've had these lines blow, by the time they can find out about it and can get to the shut-off valve, that's quite a bit of water that's coming down, so.
oh, I'm
If
sure.
it, now that these neighborhoods are coming in all around these PRVs and around their pipeline, they got lucky the last time that it didn't flood.
Well, I
Bunch of
know-
houses right around that PRV.
I know
number 3.
redundancy costs, but I mean, with the automation anymore, I mean, you could put a valve to switch automatically from one to the other unless it failed, so something they ought to look at.
Yeah, maybe talk to them about this. Their system operator will be at the meeting today, so he could give you a little more about the redundancy on this.
Might be something to consider. Okay, thanks, Russell.
Okay?
Thank you, Russell. Blaine, do you have any questions
Yeah,
or comments?
I have a question, Russell, on it. On your write-up, it says that in a couple of years, they're looking at putting a pond.
Yeah.
Have they talked about financing for the pond, or do they have any estimate? Or, are they gonna be coming
Yes.
back in a couple of years,
Yes.
wanting more type thing? Just-
They are. They're talking, $300,000, $500,000, depending on the size of the pond. They just want to get these valves done now, and it'll be the same size valves. Everything will be just the same with this pond, but it'll just, again, give them some redundancy, and it'll really eliminate those pressure spikes, any chance of them, from the top valve coming to the lower system, down to the high-pressure east zone. So it'll make it similar to the west zone, which has a pond above the west side low-pressure zone. So this will eliminate those extreme high pressures. But they will be coming back in a few years. They just didn't want to do it all now. They just want to get those PRVs taken care of now. It's a big enough project.
Dana or Spencer, do you have any questions of Russell?
I don't.
Dana, do you have any?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, Russell. All right.
Yes, oh, I take that back.
Oh, you have a question, Dana?
Yeah, a little bit more procedurally for the board. In reading this, their water bills are low, and it says that, you know, they're below the board's affordability guideline. What impact does that have on their application? Will they be required to raise it?
Okay, I was waiting for that question. Someone's
Can
finally.
you not hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, we're good, Dana. Everybody's listening to you.
Okay, they will be required to raise their share assessments. We're looking at just a scenario of about $5.69 a share for all shares in the company. One of the issues is with that affordability guideline is Grantsville City is the entity that sells the culinary water, and they have super low rates. So it was kind of an issue for Grantsville. They felt like they were, you know, going to be punished because Grantsville City's water rates are so low, and it would be punishing these folks to, you know, raise their interest rates or increase their assessments even further from what it's at 30 years. So that's why it was just felt to give them a little bit of a slack there, let them repay it at 30 years, and their request is for 30 years because that's when their reservoir and that other pipeline are being repaid at 31 years. So they're hoping to let it go for 30 years. And for them to meet the affordability guideline at 1% interest, it was 26 or 27 years to exactly meet the guideline. And just thought we'd let them put it in for them for 30 years. So that's about it. The board,
So you rounded up a little bit.
yes, rounded up as they requested. And and also because of the fact that they've installed meters 20 years ago. They're one of the original people that put a lot of money into metering their system. Just felt that they should be put in for what they kept waiting for somebody to ask me, why aren't we going to hit them to the very last penny of the affordability guideline?
Okay, and then
So-
is this kind of a homeowner versus the agricultural component?
Well,
Issue
it's the
or
city
not that?
versus the irrigation company, and they could even tell you a little more about that. About a little bit of friction between the city's culinary system and them and their irrigation company. Also want to point out that they really do consider themselves more of an agricultural irrigation company. So although they do serve a lot of secondary connections, they kind of had to get into that business begrudgingly, that as farm properties were becoming homes, they allowed them to convert those agricultural shares into into secondary water. And so that was another reason. Want to keep them at 1% interest. And yeah, could have hit them to the last penny and gone for 27 years. But, and again, because they're going to be coming back in a few years, such as maybe 2-3 years from now, to do that head pond, wanted to give them a little bit of room to move with the affordability guideline for their next loan they're coming to us for.
Any surprises awaiting us on this one as far, are they going to come in and request different
No.
terms?
No, that's about it. That was what they were requesting, was 30 years, and I really thought in this case we should give them a little bit of slack, that just a little bit, room to move there for their next project. So that was it. They've got, they're happy to get that 1% in 30 years.
Dana, does that
The rest
answer
of-
your question?
Yeah, so are you saying that they're raising it roughly $5 and some change per share?
Yes,
So the increase will go to the agricultural users as well as the secondary users?
yes. If you look at the financial feasibility section, it explains how it was.
Remember, I'm new here.
That's fine. Good
look
to ask the
down- yeah.
questions, Dana.
Yeah,
And, you know, you're welcome to
Mm-hmm.
ask the questions when the individuals from the irrigation company come, if you want to ask the question again at that time.
Sure, thank you.
Or if you're satisfied with it now, it's good too.
I am.
In the
Okay.
A lot of times, the agricultural pressures on a district are hard, such that, you know, they push to not have their rates increased. And with hay, the price that it is around here anyway, you know, it's unpopular to raise rates for the irrigators where they don't mind raising them for the secondary customers. And I was just hoping that it was across the board. And it is still a pretty low water rate that they're paying, so.
well, another issue is, the company will tell you this, for the agricultural farmers, they have to have 3 to 4 shares per acre. So that's at $75 per share for agricultural water. That's like $225 to $300 per acre for irrigation. And they will tell you that is one of the highest assessments for agricultural water per acre in the state. That was another reason I thought, you know,
So it says 25 in here, so that'd be $75
75.
per acre.
excuse me, $75 to $100 per acre. Still, they're claiming that is one of the highest assessments you'll find. Couldn't verify that through the Department of Agriculture, but from years of doing this, it is a high assessment. For
I
about
can tell you
$100.
down where I'm at in Millard County, that's dirt cheap. Each acre takes about 3 acre feet and water goes for $100 a foot, $300 an acre.
Wow.
So compare it to Millard County and that's a bargain.
And our duty is 6 acre feet per acre, and depending on how many acre feet you own, the price fluctuates. So, you know, if you own 125 acre feet, it's less per acre foot than if you own 5. But it's at the higher end, it's $150 an acre foot, and at the low end, it's about $25 to $30 for someone who has a lot.
I'll keep my head down because I know I'm not paying that much money for my water. Okay, well, we can ask the question when we get in general meeting if you folks would like to do that. And otherwise, any other questions on the Grantsville project?
Randy will make the motion if Juliette is not on, he said.
All right, and to clarify, Randy Crozier will make the motion if Juliette Tennert is not here for our general meeting, so
And-
we'll
and I-
have that contingency.
Yes, and I do expect her to be on, but that's a good contingency.
Okay, well, we may work Juliette, and we'll see how things shake out at that. Yes, we will. There you go. All right, thank you, Russell.
If I might think, I
Yes,
wonder
Blaine.
with the clarification that Shalane gave us, where Charles as the vice chair is going to be conducting, Charles cannot make motions or vote. Juliette being the chair, where she's not going to be chairing the meeting, she can vote, she can make motions. So I think we need to make that clarification that for today's meetings, Charles as the vice chair is assuming the role of the chair as far as motions and voting, and Juliette will assume the role of another board member for today's meetings.
Sounds good, Blaine. Thanks for the clarification. And I have one that I'll have to step away from in the agenda. Are we gonna let Russell go, or do we?
No, you
Move
got
on
me,
to his-
you got
on
me
to the
for
next
4 more.
project.
You got me for 4 more projects here.
Okay, Russell.
And before we move on, I also want to mention on Grantsville, the secondary water currently costs more than culinary water does. So that's another issue about the low Grantsville city culinary water rates. It's kind of like we're be punishing the irrigation company over Grantsville city's low water rates. They have an issue with that as well. Okay.
Okay, good to know.
Okay.
All right, we will move into RM 040 Colville City under committal of funds. Russell.
Okay, the purpose of the project is purchase and install 445 secondary connections in Colville City. Cost estimate and sharing remain as authorized, with the board loan being $332,000, the grant being $910,000, and they would provide $58,000 for a total project cost of $1,300,000. Staff recommends the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $332,000 as a loan, and the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $26,000, including reserves. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. Any questions or comments from the board?
Standard run-of-the-mill, what we've been doing on all these meters.
Okay, now, are we gonna do a gross motion on these meter applications, or one by one? All right, and Kyle won't be here, so Blaine, would you make the motion on that one, please? And we'll go ahead with that. Next one is Hooper Irrigation Company, RM 042. Russell, and
Okay, purpose of this project is to purchase and install 1,010 secondary meters in Hooper City and Taylor area. The applicant estimates that approximately 852 acre-feet will be conserved by installation of the meters. Cost estimate and sharing remain as authorized, with the board providing $798,000 as a loan. The grant would be $2,191,000, and the applicant would provide $141,000 for a total project cost of $3,130,000. Staff recommends the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $798,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $57,600. That's staff's report.
thank you, Russell. Maybe we should have Dana, would you like to make the motion on that project?
I'll be happy to. That'd be fine.
We'll put you down as the motion maker on that. Next agenda item is Tremont City, RM 102. Mr. Hadley.
Oh, yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Marisa Egbert.
I'm Marisa Egbert. The reason I wanted to come up, particularly in the briefing meeting, is to explain some of the differences we will have here with some of these projects, the majority of these projects, actually. If you'll notice, the project numbers from RM, they're not in order on the agenda, but anything from RM 100 on, so 100 up to 109, these are all projects that we've been calling water conservation projects. So this is different than what we've been doing. This is still ARPA funding, but it is not for the purchase and installation necessarily of secondary meters like we've been doing since August. This is for projects that have the purpose of conservation. And I just want to give a little bit better explanation. So, excuse me, RM 040 Colville and RM 042 Hooper that Russell just went over, those are committal of funds for the loan portion of secondary meters. And then if you look down to Centerfield and Moroni, RM 035, RM 059, those are also the committal of funds for the loan of the secondary meter installation, or the more typical, the secondary meter installation projects we've done. But the rest are different. So I'm gonna open up, if you'll note in the reports, for any of these from 100 to 109, RM 100 to 109, let me get to the, okay. Under project summary, we've got the first two paragraphs that we have read several times and have been in all the reports about the secondary meter installation with the ARPA funds. In these reports, we added a third paragraph, and so I'll read that. In 2022, the Utah legislature allocated ARPA funds for secondary water suppliers to purchase and install meters on existing pressurized systems. In 2023, so just this last legislative session, additional funds were allocated by the legislature for those systems that installed meters prior to May 4th, 2022. As indicated in Utah Code 73-10-34.5, subsection 7, those systems that have not otherwise received a grant to install secondary meters can receive a grant from the board for the purpose of conservation and in an amount not to exceed $2 million. And I actually had the code on the laptop, and I didn't bring the laptop up. But again, it's those that have not otherwise received a grant to install secondary meters. They can receive a grant from the board for the purpose of conservation in an amount not to exceed $2 million. So these are all systems that installed their meters before, some as early as I think 2010 and even before that. So talk about proactive. They were installing meters. And so what happened is we've had the $50 million and the $200 million in ARPA funds that were allocated to the board for installing secondary meters. An additional $18 million in this last legislative session was allocated to the board specifically for these types of applicants, specifically. So it's beyond the $250 million. So the amount of funds going towards these projects today is not interfering with the funds that we are working with already to install secondary meters. And we've talked about how there's still an additional about $41 million left in the original $50 and $200 million. That $41 million is going to go specifically to purchase and install secondary meters for applicants. This $18 million is separate from that. Let me see. So also when this whole thing started and we were grappling with all the different things in the legislation, we specifically were trying to understand this subsection 7 and what it meant for the purpose of conservation. I specifically happened to be at a conference and I talked to Representative Tim Hawks, he wasn't one of the sponsors, but he had worked on that portion. And I said, what is this? What is the purpose of conservation? What does that mean? And he said, I think verbatim, but maybe paraphrased, a water conservation project, a project for water conservation. I said, like what? And he said, anything that conserves water. I said, like a water conservation garden, so our understanding of this is that any sort of project that conserves water falls under this. So the reason I bring this up is because, as you may have noticed, these projects are very different. They're not necessarily installing and purchasing and installing meters on systems that haven't had meters. So there's varying projects going on, all with the idea that they've already installed meters and now they're doing additional projects to conserve water. So there's installation of AMR systems, there's replacing meters that are old that weren't necessarily, that were mechanical meters, and they're replacing them. They're putting on so new technology so they can be radio read, all these sorts of things to improve the system and to conserve water. So just wanted to explain that and help understand the separation, that this money for these is not taking away from the $250 million from before. And I think that's all my notes. I don't know if you have any questions.
Go ahead.
I just have an observation, and on this first one with Tremont and City, it really caught my attention. The purpose being water conservation, and you've got how many acre feet it conserves? $2 million for 5 acre feet, $400,000 per acre foot for the water conserved is what this first one is doing. And I'm wondering, does the legislature have that intent of spending close to $500,000 per acre foot to conserve? I mean, seems completely out of line until you read in the additional, all the other work that they're doing and all of that. But that's, you know, $2 million to conserve 5 acre feet seems completely out of line to me.
So I probably could ask you the same question, what their intent was. I don't know specifically, but I know part of the intent was they already installed meters. They were proactive and they did not get grant money for it. So there were discussions from, my understanding is there were discussions from many of these systems talking to the legislature, hey, we already installed meters. So it's in the statute. It's what we've been told to do. There were no criteria as far as how much water it had to save. And also the additional $18 million is specifically for this.
Yeah, just
Great question.
a brief comment, and not that I'm a resident of Tremont City, but I'm involved with it to the degree that they are using Bear River Canal Company water shares to service their secondary water system. And they have been working very hard trying to acquire canal shares to irrigate yards so that they would not burden their culinary water systems. And so they've been on a huge spending spree. I'm not justifying this action, which, as Blaine points out, seems bizarre. But anyway, that's some background of what Tremont is trying to do, is preserve their drinking water supply by using this secondary water, and they've invested a huge amount of money on improving their system.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Charles, because the purpose of the ARPA funding is to protect drinking water systems. And so with the state legislature put this towards secondary water, and that's the discussion in those first 2 paragraphs, how secondary water helps us preserve our drinking water systems by using secondary water for irrigation and not culinary. So.
And Mr. Vice Chair, if I may?
Yes.
I would just note that my understanding is the legislature authorized and appropriated this money to the Board of Water Resources for this purpose. So they're giving you the discretion to provide this grant money as you see fit in line with the statute.
I took the liberty and I looked at all of them. That was the one that was the most outlandish, was 400,000 an acre foot. They varied down to 2,500 an acre feet. Some of them were close to 100,000 acre foot, some of them 16,000, all that. But this one definitely caught my attention. And I understand the statute and I understand the limitations and guidelines that we've got, but I will say that it caught my attention.
Sure,
All
Shalane.
right, let's just all jump in here. I would also like to note that what this doesn't take into account is what they may have conserved by installing their meters before the law required it. That's nowhere in here. We didn't ask for that. So that, if we had that information, that might help ease the concern with this. But I think the fact of the matter is we don't have that information of what they might have done with the meters that were already installed. This is just, hey, we have a project. It's kind of like some of the discussion that we're having with some of the new language, about a new project that isn't meters that will conserve water, more water. There's nothing in the law that says how much more water it has to conserve. So I just wanted to point that out. We don't know what they conserved by installing meters when they did. And that's really what this law, this specific funding and that small, tiny portion of the law that was quite extensive about meters and funding and all of it, was simply that if you have already done your meters and you have another water conservation project, we'll help you out with that. So, thanks. I also wanted to note just one little housekeeping thing, just so if things look a little different and maybe we're not lumping things together like we normally do. We decided this time to make it easier on staff and let one staff member get up and present you their reports and then bring another one up instead of playing musical chairs all meeting long. So that's why you'll see some of the secondary meter loans being committed, and then we jump to water conservation projects. Then we might go back to secondary meter loans, more water conservation projects. So we started with the feasibility report. Let Russell get all of his out there. And then we'll wrap it up with Tom at the end because he has a special item. So just wanted to point that out. Normally, we'd group them and then put them in project number order. But we thought, let's just go with a staff member at a time. So
You guys are just too dang efficient.
we're
That's,
trying to be. You know, our agendas aren't getting any shorter, so thanks.
and I will note, on the Tremont City thing, the mayor of Tremont is my cousin. So, and the previous mayor was my cousin too. So I've just, and you know, I'm glad to be the chair today, so I don't have to make the motion or recuse myself from the motion.
Yeah.
So are you announcing that you're running for the next position? Is that what you're giving us a heads up? Is you're gonna run for mayor, move into town?
No,
Or
I'm
what,
just
Charles?
gonna crawl in a hole anymore.
Well, I just wondered what your political ambitions were there, but,
Very small.
And I got a couple calls Friday afternoon from someone wanting to know why their water was shut off. The landlord and the tenant calling me because they were looking for Bear River, and so they Googled Bear River and got Bear River Development Planning and got me. And so then I Googled and found Acme Water, and there's Holmgren's there too. So they're causing apparently a lot of problems up there. They were fixing a leak apparently. So Charles lost his water too, so there was no favoritism.
Yeah,
in
and
that.
it got back to me. Marisa,
So I finally
like she
checked
said,
with
she
Charles.
texted me and
What's
said,
going on?
What's going on up there?
But we got it figured out, and they were happy. Just another comment. When we received these applications, again, going back and trying to look at the statute, as a staff and specifically, I worked with executive leadership to look over these and going, you know, we've been so careful that it's just purchase and install secondary meters. We really had to kind of, us black and white engineer brains had to kind of, you know, let go a little bit and try to understand where we were. The Grantsville project that Russell just presented was actually submitted as for this grant, for grant funds. And I didn't feel comfortable about the PRVs. And it's something that I discussed with Shalane and Joel and Candace. And so they said, well, we've got this other project and we were going to come for a loan. I said, well, let's put the PRVs on the loan. And so we switched up. But there was we had discussions with each of the, I had discussions with each of the applicants on these, and us just trying to feel comfortable and understand what we were doing here with this money and trying to take care of it. So from staff, you know, just trying to go with what we felt matches the statute and what is being asked of us. But again, like Candace said, you are the Board of Water Resources, and so it's up to the board to make those decisions.
One other comment, you know, this is a complicated project, and I mean, there's lots of different ways to look at the amount of conserved water, and I assume that this one is being, I think you got more savings in this project than probably this report. shows, would be my guess.
And
if
that's
you're looking
possible,
at-
yeah. This is
that-
what they gave, the information they gave us at this point.
Because you're converting over culinary to secondary, I assume is what's taking
Yes.
place. And if you look at those acres, there's a lot of different ways to look at that conserved culinary. You're not going to serve that many homes with just that 5 acre feet of water. So,
Yeah.
so I think personally, I think the numbers they gave you, they were extremely conservative, in my opinion. So I don't think the cost is per acre foot is what we're truly looking at there. That's, I mean, it's a complicated
Yeah.
way to figure the savings, but I believe there's way more savings than what's shown because, I'm sorry, those homes are taking a lot more than 5 acre foot. And if you did an acre foot exchange over from culinary to secondary, there's way more than 5 acre feet of savings
Yeah.
of that culinary water for long term.
Thank you. And Mr.
Just a
Chair, if I may.
comment.
There's another project that is similar where they're only on the culinary system. So the idea is that they're actually getting pipelines, not just meters, but pipelines, so that they can have secondary water there. And so this isn't the amount of water they feel they're conserving from the drinking water system. This is overall, because the secondary system shuts off. In one case, 1st of October, and another case, one of them doesn't start till May. So I can attest that culinary irrigators on their lawns are watering early April despite snowpack and rain and monsoons, and into late November, October. So that is part of the savings they're looking at really of, hey, they're only going to be able to water between this instead of whenever they want. So that was part of it too. But I really feel like all of these applicants have really have really good intent in this and trying to make their systems more efficient and better and provide a better service to their customers as well.
Thank you, Marisa, for that discussion. And I guess since this might be a little bit of a difficult one, maybe I could ask Randy to make the motion on that particular
I'm still going
agenda
to
item.
present the application here for you. real
Oh,
quick.
you're still working
I've
on
got-
Tremont?
Yes, I've got.
Okay.
I wanted to point
Thank
out
you, Russell.
okay, on the 2 previous projects for committal funds, Colville City and Hooper, because those are just committal funds for conventional loans, they are not required to be here today. So they will not be participating in the meeting, but they will be watching the YouTube streaming live video. But they are not going to be in the meeting to answer questions.
Okay. Tremont will not either, you
No,
think?
no, the next 2, Tremont
Okay.
and City and Mountain Green, secondary, because we're
Okay.
authorizing and committing
All
funds for them. They both will be here online answering questions.
Very good.
And with Grantsville Irrigation, 3 of the folks from the company will be here. 2 of the board members, well, the chairman of the board, their system operator, and their engineer will be here for Grantsville. Okay.
Good.
All right,
Thanks.
on Tremonton, okay, they began installing meters in 2018. They've got 1,205 secondary connections, and all the connections are metered. The average lot size is 0.45 acres, with about 0.23 acres irrigated. I just did a quick calculation. Weber Basin claims that you'll save 30%, conserve 30% of the water on secondary connections once you meter them. For 0.23 acres in Tremonton, for your average lawn size, if you just conservatively say they're using 2 acre feet per acre of lawn, that comes out to an extra 180 acre feet they would be saving by doing this project. So that's pretty significant. If you're to say they're having installed meters is probably saving something like an extra 180 acre feet. So you could say They're actually conserving 185 acre feet with this project. That's just off the top of my head. Okay. All right. They're requesting funding to install about 22,000 feet of pipeline and appurtenances, such as laterals, meters, additional pump and telemetry work, and electrical work on the city's secondary irrigation system. The project will add an additional 280 residential connections, the city cemetery, an elementary school, and a church to the secondary system. Construction is expected to begin spring of 2024 and be completed by fall of 2024. Okay, the cost estimate and sharing, our project is expected to cost $2,122,000. Staff recommends the board authorize and commit $2 million as a water conservation grant, and the board will be reimbursing 100% of the eligible costs up to $2 million. That's staff's report.
All right, thank you, Russell. And again, Randy, you'll make the motion, please. Okay, thank you. Next item, Mountain Green Secondary Water Company.
Okay, Mountain Green began installing meters on their pressurized secondary system in 2019. They've got approximately 650 secondary connections, and all the connections are metered. And the average lot size up there is about 0.28 acre feet. The applicant's requesting funding to replace a deteriorated 50-year-old diversion structure on Cottonwood Creek. Diversion structure is in poor repair with gaps between the footings and the wall, as well as the bottom of the outlet pipe and bottom of the diversion box. Water was being lost to the secondary system through these gaps and holes. They expect to conserve 120 acre feet annually from replacement of this diversion structure. And we actually have some measurements of how they came up with that. It had to do with the dewatering pumps. They needed 3 pumps to dewater the site when no water was flowing down the creek. That's how much was going under their old diversion structure, just from the cutoff wall. So it'd be at least 120 acre feet. Okay, construction was completed in February of 2023. The estimated cost of the project is $301,000, and staff recommends the board authorize and commit 100% of the project cost up to $301,000 as a water conservation grant. And that is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. Questions for Russell?
Just an observation, this one's a little slightly different than the previous one for Tremont. Tremont is proposing to build, this one is past tense, it's already built, it
Yes.
appears. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Spencer or Dana, do you have any questions for Russell on that project?
I do not.
So just clarification, we do approve past built projects then? Is that, I guess, just looking for clarification on that?
In this case, we do, with this grant money for this $18 million. We are doing this. Generally, we do not fund projects that are already built.
But it was.
Okay, I was just clarifying that. Thank you.
So it was authorized in the legislation that we could do a past project, just so that's clarified on this
Yes.
particular piece of money.
The legislation did not say, they left it up to us.
Oh, they left it
okay.
up to us? I thought it,
Bye.
I just gave my observation, my understanding that is that the legislation
One more
did not
secretary.
clarify that, they kind of left it up to us.
To go back to that point of funding previous projects, I want to go back to Draper Irrigation Company. If you recall, they had installed a $2 million pipeline on their own 5 years ago, and they came to us a couple of board meetings ago and wanted to get reimbursed for that $2 million for a project they did on their own 5 years before, and we denied them that. So we generally don't fund things that are already built, but in this case we do.
If I may on this one, when the application came in, and when I spoke to Mountain Green, it was not my understanding that the project had been completed in February. It's not until I got the report, saw the report, that I saw that it had been completed. So the application did not indicate that it had already been completed. So that's the difference on this one. We don't typically fund projects that have been built, so.
Yeah, I thought we had totally shied away from projects that have been built. That's been the practice in the past. So this one is different. When was the bill passed and all of that, I guess? The bill was in the process, legislation. Were they in session at this time? Had this bill passed or?
Well, I'm trying to think, on the report, when was the application received?
Well, I was just gonna say, so HB 242 was passed, last year. So that portion of the statute that says we could use money, some of the ARPA money that was appropriated for those that have already fully metered and hadn't received any other grants under this section, and for the purposes of a water conservation, that had already been passed the previous year. What happened this last session, one of the things was the legislature appropriated additional 18 million for the purpose of these very specific type of projects.
So if I can add a little more to that, I will say Mountain Green was one of the entities involved, my understanding is, in lobbying the legislature for specific funds for this part of the bill. So they were very aware last year that they could use funding for a future water conservation project. They were waiting on us to come up with a process to apply for those funds. We didn't get that done until early this year and opened an application period after we knew we had additional funding, we would have additional funding available, and then those funds were appropriated. So Mountain Green is an entity who has been in a lot of contact with various people at the division saying, so when can we get this? Because they knew they had already had their meters requirement met and knew that the law passed in 2022 allowed them to possibly get funding for a future project. So for them, this was a future project. We just didn't have our process figured out until early this year. But the law was passed in '22. We just didn't figure out the process to get the funding available until '23. So I think they took a little bit of a risk doing their project early this year. But frankly, when they submitted their application, they didn't tell us that it was finished. It wasn't until we had accepted their application and conducted the investigation that it was revealed that, oh, it's actually done. So again, board discretion.
So this one gets muddier the deeper you go, right?
It's also my understanding that we were okay with the fact that they'd already installed this diversion, had already replaced it. The board, staff thought it was.
I think the board's heard of it.
Oh, well, staff, I should say. It's my understanding. We were okay with it and approving it.
Yeah, the dates on the report indicate application was received on the February 21st this year, and the project was completed February 23.
Well, and
So
if
that
you
happened at the same
recall, and you may or may not, it's been a crazy year, but we had a special electronic meeting in February specifically to ask you about having an application, a specific application for these types of projects, and an application period. That was in February. Right after the meeting, we put this out and said, submit your applications for your water conservation projects. So they couldn't have, and I'll be frank, I think they did submit an application prior when we had on our original our original application period for secondary meters. They said, we've already done our meters, we want a project, and we said, well, we're not ready to do that yet. So we put them off is probably the only reason we as a staff would be okay with funding this one that was completed before we're asking you to consider it. Simply because they had their processes and they knew this should be an option. In the law, it states that we could fund future water conservation projects. And it just, with all the secondary meter applications we were inundated with, these got postponed, pushed back, delayed. And so I think as a staff, we said, well, that's not really their fault that they went ahead and fixed a deteriorating diversion. They were ready to go before we were. So I think that's why, at least me personally, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation of funding this project, simply because they were ready before we were.
So that does make me feel a little more comfortable to know that they had made application and it had been set aside. And that's probably important that that's understood in board meeting, because I don't want to open a can of worms that people are coming in saying, well, I did this project, I want funded for this. So there's a fine line there, so I think it needs to be defined why staff was comfortable with this.
And I'm happy to reiterate that if you'd like during the actual board meeting.
Spencer, you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to bring that up, just a point of clarification. I agree with the comment that was just said. I think if staff makes that clarification, I'm okay with it as well, so.
Okay. Madam Director, did you want to comment to it?
I just wanted to clarify in statute that it says, notwithstanding the other provisions of this section, the board may issue a grant to a secondary water supplier that meets those conditions, that they haven't received, they're fully metered before May 4th, 2022. They haven't received a grant under this section, and for the purposes of conservation, not to exceed $2 million. So once again, the legislature provided you the discretion to make it an option or not. You guys could have said, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to focus only on meters. You gave staff the direction to go ahead and open an application period for that, for those type of applications. So once again, it's your discretion.
So that was my that I felt that there was the right that we could do it. So I'm okay with it because it is implied in the statute.
I'd also like to say, I haven't had time to read through the rest of the reports, but I kind of thought there were going to be some other ones similar to this, that we were going to give them the grant money for projects already built. I'm sorry if I misunderstood that, but during the presentation, I've got photos of their previous diversion and the new diversion that was built, so we can show you what a great project we're paying for.
And that's what I was going to say, Russell, yeah, I was going to just bring that up, that Russell's got pictures showing actual construction also going on. You've got the plans and specs already, right, that they had, so I've seen those also in the folder, in our project folder for that. So Russell has seen that, and so there at least is that as well. It's not just, I had seen pictures of the deteriorating structure when this started, so Russell has now seen more of that. And I don't know if we have pictures of the actual completed, yeah.
Yes,
so.
we have a beautiful new structure we're paying for with a nice cutoff wall.
Good. Spencer Jones, would you be willing to make the motion on that agenda item?
Yes, I would.
Okay, we'll put you down for that for the general meeting. All right, moving on. We are to RM 101, Mapleton City, Ani Baynard.
Sorry, my three projects are the water conservation grants.
Okay, Ms. Vice Chair, can I just interject something? I just went through those in a hurry, and this one is the only one that was past tense, the one we just discussed. All the rest are proposed in the future. So the one that we just talked about appears to be the only one that is on that other criteria we just talked about, so.
So Mapleton City began installing meters prior to 2018, and they're fully metered. I think there's about 1,500 secondary connections that are fully metered. The applicant is requesting funding to convey water from Serviceberry Springs, Dunham Springs, and unnamed springs to Mapleton's canyon storage tanks. The project includes the installation of a 14-inch HDPE pipeline that will carry water previously conveyed through an open channel, unlined channel in Maple Canyon. By piping the unlined channel, less water will be lost to evaporation, seepage, and surrounding vegetation, and the applicant expects to conserve about 160 acre-feet upon completion of the project. The total cost of the project will be about approximately $5,135,000, and the applicant's portion would be $3,135,000. And the staff recommends the board authorize and commit $2 million as a water conservation grant. They're planning to begin the project this summer and be completed by the summer of 2024. So,
Very good. Questions for Ani from board members?
and they will be in
Dana or-
person today or
Yeah,
online.
Dana
That's
or
a question.
Spencer, do you have any questions?
I have none.
Okay. Very good. That one is in Provo River District. Blaine, would you please make the motion on that project? Very good. All right, next agenda item is RM 103, Grantsville Irrigation Company. We're back to Grantsville.
Yeah, so I got the reverse project. This is more of a water conservation project, so we thought it was better suited for the $2 million. So Grantsville began installing meters way back in 2001. They're fully metered at this time, but they have growth, so they're going to install a few more. But the applicant is requesting funding to repair and replace the North Willow and South Willow diversions and to install, repair, and replace meters. So they want to replace the main diversion wall of North Willow diversion, and they want to fully replace the entire diversion structure of South Willow. And there's a long description that I could either read or they can talk to you about it when they're here. And their meter installation, repair, and replacement involves some new services. There's 225. There's a subdivision where lots are plumbed for secondary water. There's 225 meters requested for that. And then minor subdivision and rural lots, there's about 125 meters that they could install. And then there's 2 institutional lots with large meters that they'd like to install. And then as far as replacement, they're going to replace about 1,070 residential meters and 2 large meters. And so with the meter updates, the applicant can monitor customer use and shut off those connections where their allotment has been exceeded. The diversion structures are old, and the city indicates they have significant water losses to the system due to leaks and seepage. And it is expected that about 55 acre-feet of water will be conserved upon completion of the meter installation, and about 175 acre-feet of water due to the repair of the diversion structures. And the total cost of the project is going to be approximately $2,800,000, and the staff recommends the board authorize and commit $2 million as a water conservation grant. And they will be in person today at the board meeting, if you have questions.
Thank you for that report, Ani. Just for some direction for me, are we going to try to put the 2 Grantsville ones together?
I think
we're going to hold
it
them
separate.
here and make them come back to the table?
Apparently so.
Okay, that works. That works
Yeah.
great. Yes, Marisa?
They could get $2 million, let them come back up to the table.
Yeah, heck yes, I'd do that. for $2 million.
Hey, and just to kind of, on Grantsville, just to clarify, we tried to write it so it's clear, but just to clarify it, and on a couple of the other projects where there's some replacing of meters, but there's also some new service. This is not new development. This is existing culinary users and switching them to secondary. So just want to make that distinction, that we're not helping meter and install for new development going in. So it's a newer development, but it was only on culinary. And so there's a few of them like that, and so I just want to make that clarification.
Thank you, Marisa. Any more questions for Ani about the Grantsville application? Dana, you have any questions?
I do. I have some questions.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm having trouble with what exactly, I didn't think that these funds were supposed to be used for O&M. And when I think of, replacing meters that don't work, it's operations and maintenance, and there should be a budget within the Grantsville Irrigation Company to replace their meters once they wear out. It just seems like, I can name several districts and several culinary, customers, et cetera, that have meters that don't work. And I don't see, it just seems odd to me that that's a thing. And same thing, with my experience, if you have a new subdivision and it's stubbed for secondary water, the customer should be purchasing the meter, not the water district. When they move in and build their home, they purchase a culinary meter and they purchase a secondary meter, and they're required to use both and pay impact fees for both. And maybe we're just a little different down here, but it seems that you're granting new customers meters that they should be paying for themselves.
Marisa, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, we're getting some help here, Dana,
I'm not
to
sure what
answer
the
your
rules are with
question.
that, so.
So as far as, they're already stubbed for the secondary meters, again, our understanding is these are existing culinary connections, and there's going to be several of these projects where they're now adding existing culinary users to the secondary system. And some of them will include pipelines, actually using, getting pipelines to get to those areas. This particular one just happens to be that they're stubbed and for that. So, again, we'll have to leave that to the discretion of the board, how to go from there. The O&M, yeah, and the O&M, and I don't know if I could get some help on some of that. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do where we replace pipelines. And so that distinction of the definition of O&M versus not O&M, what's that? Upgrading the system is what Shalane just said. So we've where you've got a pipeline where it's too small, and now the fire code, they're not fitting into the fire flow, so they need to upgrade their system. And so we're going in and helping them and funding not just these projects, but a lot of projects we do, helping them fund to get larger pipelines in where they've had smaller pipelines. So that's the question, is, I guess, the defining line of what is O&M versus upgrading the system, I guess. I don't know if that helped.
It does. And frankly, when you're increasing the level of service, in particular with fire flows, it's a requirement, and pipelines generally at least with culinary, don't wear out so much as they become too small with growth. But that's why people collect impact fees, and you should have some skin in the game, and you should get a loan and all those things to increase that. It just, I guess in a larger way, I always felt, even before, I was on the board or even considered to be on the board, and being from a system that's been metered since 1985, our irrigation system has been metered that long, that we have meter fees for the irrigation system, and they are collected in order to replace meters. And, in the same vein of having a conservation plan or the watering time of day, perhaps the applicants who are receiving monies to meter their customers should be required to have a dedicated fund for the repair and replacement of those meters, so they're not coming back to us in 10 or 15 years asking for a complete replacement again. There is something to be said for that. I personally think that some of that should be borne on the customer. However, I understand that maybe it can't be. Improving, to me anyway, increasing services of secondary, like by running a new pipe to a subdivision that's existing, to get more customers, is a savings of culinary water, no doubt. I don't feel that way, but to a place where the services are already stubbed to the customer and they just haven't put in a meter, it seems like a interesting ask. That's all. I'll stop talking now.
No, I
Good
appreciate
questions,
that.
Dana.
No, I appreciate that. And the board has that discretion. You could put on, we could put in that requirement that they have some sort of fund for repair and replace. There are portions of this that the board does not have to fund. And so if there's something that the board is not comfortable with, that is something that we could put in the motion, that they won't be funding a certain portion of it. Is this Mapleton or is this Grantsville? This is Grantsville. That they not fund that portion. And that's something as a staff, then we would be careful as we receive requests for reimbursement to not reimburse those portions.
If I may,
Yes,
Vice Chair. I would like to point out to Dana the code that came from HB 242 with all of this does actually require now that they have an installation reserve fund. That was part of the law, is that now they are required to set up those funds. That wasn't a requirement before. So and I know this is probably a more robust discussion than we were planning on having today, but I'm glad we're having it so everyone understands all of this. When we're talking about these water conservation projects for entities that installed meters before the law was passed, they did fund it on their own. That's the thing. They had funded all of their project. Even some of them came to this board and got funding for their project and are currently repaying it. Yeah, no grant funds. They got loan funds to do this. That's also part of the code. Utah Code 73-10-34 talks about small system secondary grants. The loans that can be given out at 1% and 5 years less than the warranty on the meter. It's all included in this same thing, but it does state that they now all have to create a reserve fund for installing and for purchasing and installing and replacing existing meters. That just wasn't in place before this law passed. So now it is a requirement. They are required to do that. And they all have to submit a plan to us by the end of 2025 stating how they're going to get all their meters installed also. So
one comment, isn't remote reading part of the new legislation, and so they had to upgrade
If-
those, or am I
If,
wrong?
that's only a requirement if they receive grant funds.
Okay,
They have to have data communication and an education component. Right, for the other grant funds, not the water conservation project, but there are, I think that is some of the presentations today are wanting to add that to their existing meter system because they realize that will help them conserve more than a meter alone.
well, and as I read this, they are upgrading with remote operations,
Yes,
so it probably makes it a little grayer, not as black and white, but I think it helps that the fact that they're going to a remote system, I think, has to be considered where they've already put all of these systems in on their own previous.
Madam Director.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Board Member Van Horn, for your comments and your questions. I think they're really good. We discussed this as staff and, whether we should allow for people who've already metered, replace meters. We thought, well, if the meter's not operating and this is for the intention of water conservation and secondary metering, I did direct the staff that we would look at those applications and then provide them to the board for your review. I did want to note in the rules that were established as part of the loan funds, so this is prior to any grants, anything that was done before 2021, the board decided that you guys would allow about $10 million, allocate up to $10 million annually in loan funds at low interest rates to those that wanted a meter. And in those rules, it does say that the funds will be allocated only for the installation of new meters. So there wasn't the intention of the board that you would go back and pay the O&M to repair and replace existing meters in those areas, that was just to try to get people to get the meter installed as part of those loan funds. But I just want to kind of bring up the kind of two elements of that. One, I don't think we had anticipated there would be a repair and replacement of kind of the O&M on meters in the loan funds, and then how we kind of thought about it with potentially looking at the meters for repair and replacement in these conservation grants. If that helped in your decision-making at all.
Sure, like to hear that distinction. So, any other comments? Dana, Spencer?
I have none.
Okay. We good to go with this one then? Okay. That's going to be Juliette's motion to make. And we'll hope she's here for making that motion. Or we'll modify if we have to. Okay.
Thanks to Shalane and Marisa for that help.
Yeah, sure.
Lots of rules.
Next item is RM 109 Springville City. Ani.
Yes. So Springville City began installing their meters in 2019, and they're also fully metered. They have approximately 1,590 secondary connections. And so the applicant is requesting funding to pipe about 3,300 feet of the concrete-lined Upper Highland ditch with Upper High Line ditch with 24-inch diameter HDPE pipe. The concrete-lined ditch is deteriorating and cracking, causing seepage, joint slippage, and gaps. The applicant will also install an automatic meter reading system to remotely read about, and this is not a typo, I don't think, 3,300 existing culinary meters. The applicant expects to conserve about 118 acre-feet of water that is lost to seepage and evaporation upon completion of the piping project. They expect to conserve additional water upon completion of the AMR system and will be able to detect leaks quickly. The total cost of this project is just under $2 million. So it's about like $1,900,000 or something like that. So the staff recommends the board authorize and commit 100% of the project costs up to $2 million as a water conservation grant. And they plan to begin this project in the fall of 2024 and completed by winter of 2026. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Ani. Questions from board? Blaine?
This is just a generic question with those that I've been looking at it, and this one says up to $2 million, and the distinction that you just gave was it's not quite 2 million. The others say, most of them say $2 million.
Because it's above the
Because
the
it's
2 million.
above, and I'm assuming that's the distinction, and,
Yeah,
okay,
so we won't give them 2 million if they don't spend 2 million, so,
right.
yeah.
So one question I have on there, are they truly a .116 lot size with .11 acres irrigated? That's not much of a dwelling to be living in. Are these camp trailers, or what are we living in?
This is what they put on their application, so we wanted to ask them when they are here today.
Well, I just,
I guess I should have asked
it
that question.
seems a little odd to me. I guess, anyway, it looks like awful tight living quarters.
I'll recheck the application, but you might want to ask them that question when they're here, so.
Any questions from Spencer or Dana?
Spencer has none.
Okay.
I don't have any questions either. I'll make the motion if you want.
Sure, Dana, we'd like you to do that.
Happy to.
All right, we'll put you down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next one we go to is RM 035, Centerfield City, Sanpete County, Ben Merritt. Mr. Merritt.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Okay, we got Centerfield City. They are one of our ARPA applicants. They are going to purchase and install 480 secondary water meters. They were authorized back in August 2022. Since then, they have requested a bit of additional funding. They'd like to install some automatic shutoff valves that operate in conjunction with their secondary meters. Their system, or their rights, work in such a way that each applicant has an allotment of water. Once that water's been delivered, the valves will automatically shut off. So they will be here today to answer any questions the board has about including that portion of the project along with the original. So with that,
Ben, quick
yeah.
question. I'm not aware, this is in my area, I'm not aware if they're gonna request any changes. Have you heard any rumblings along, are they content with these terms?
With the repayment terms?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So they, I told them that they would have to, because they're a city and they're bonding, I told them that they would, or their new, they had started working on their bond. I told them that their bond requirements would have to be changed to match the increase in funding. But fortunately, they had already exceeded the amount of additional that they're requesting. So yeah, they've already planned essentially for these terms. Do you want me to read through the repayment? I don't know if that's necessary.
Whatever you feel comfortable with, Ben.
Any questions on that project? Any other questions, I guess?
No, just strictly a meter
Yeah, metering.
application.
The only difference here is they're going to be putting on automatic shutoff valves, which will not be covered by the grant, but they will be covered by the bond.
Okay. Blaine Ipson will make the motion in the general board meeting. Our next agenda item is Moroni City RM 059, and Ben, you're up again, or still.
So Moroni City is another ARPA project. They're going to be putting in 511 secondary water meters. They have jumped through the hoops. They have, they're ready for commitment of funds. And they are ready to proceed with their bond. So, yeah, there's that one. Total project cost of $1,355,000. Any questions on that one?
No, Ben, none, not from me. Any board members have questions? Blaine will ask you to make the motion on that, since that is your territory. All right, next agenda item is Saratoga Springs, RM 100, and I was curious, it lists Juliette Tennert as the board member, and I thought that was Provo River area, so we'll,
Do we have
yes,
a board member
Marisa,
for the area yet?
Can I just stay up here?
you bet.
The mask is not going to come off all the way this time. Next time it's just going to stay on. So that's something I talked with Juliette about, since we didn't have Provo River District board member yet. And she talked about that she could cover for that time. And so I think we switched all of them to say Juliette. No, some still say Provo River.
One that's Juliette.
Oh.
This is the first one.
All right. Sorry for that lack of consistency. But that is something that we had talked to her about. Maybe she doesn't want all of the rest of them after all. So,
Okay, we'll,
did you have a question about the Provo River District Board, or is that something we can talk about later? We'll talk about that later.
we're just, good, just one clarification on that board member assignment. So, Ben, your discussion on Saratoga Springs, please.
Okay, this is part of our water conservation $2 million projects that we've been discussing on and off throughout the morning. So Saratoga Springs City, they began installing secondary water meters back in 2016. They have about 9,660 connections, all of which are metered. So what they want to use this $2 million is to install some pipeline to some neighborhoods that don't currently have secondary water. Right now they're irrigating their landscapes with culinary water. Approximately 200 connections is what they're going to add to the secondary system. They are also wanting to convert approximately 2.6 acres of park strip to waterwise landscaping. The city's been catching a lot of flack because they're pushing all these water conservation initiatives, but they have this huge park strip that nobody ever uses. So they're wanting to get rid of that. They're wanting to begin construction this fall. They think they'll finish up in the spring. This is also one of the projects. They're not going to conserve a lot of water, but again, we've gone over that. But so this project, there were some other components of the project that were not included. They were on the application, but not in the report because they chose to focus on only what would be covered, or only the number of items that would be covered by the grant, if that makes sense. So their total project cost is $2,607,000 estimated. Any questions on that one?
Questions for Ben from board members? Seeing none, we will ask Juliette Tennert to make the motion when we come to that agenda item. Next agenda item is City of Roosevelt, RM 106, Randy Crozier's area, and Ben Merritt is the project manager.
Okay, this is very similar to the previous project. These guys started installing meters back in 2010. They currently have 740 secondary connections, all of which are metered. They are wanting to install an additional 146 secondary meters, but also install 11,500 feet of pipeline, which will connect some neighborhoods to the secondary system, which are currently irrigating with culinary water. So very similar to the previous project. These guys estimate they're going to conserve about 60 acre feet so a little bit better than the last one. But, and that's because the irrigation season is from April to September, whereas with the culinary system, they're able to irrigate basically whenever they want. They are expected to begin construction spring 2024 and finish spring 2025. This project, the cost estimate came right in at $2 million. Staff recommends the board authorizing 100% of the project cost up to $2 million as a water conservation grant. Any questions on that one?
Any questions from Spencer or Dana, Randy or Blaine?
No, sir.
You're prepared to make the motion, Mr. Crozier? Very good. All right. All right, Ben, Spanish Fork City, RM 108, your presentation, please.
Okay, so Spanish Fork City began installing their meters in 2002. So these guys are really been really ahead of the curve on this one. They have approximately 10,000 secondary connections. All of them are metered, and they are seeking funding to replace approximately 9,800 feet of 30-inch steel pipeline with HDPE pipe. It's going to be not a direct replacement, but the term is escaping me at the moment, where they put
Slip lining?
Yep, slip line. They're going to be slip lining their pipeline. It's a great big pipeline up in Spanish Fork Canyon. Transmits approximately 1,000 to 2,000 gallons per minute of culinary water. The city estimates that this pipeline, in its current condition, is responsible for about half of the city's total water losses. And I don't have a number on that, but that's what they've reported. So it's up in Spanish Fork Canyon. About 2,200 feet of that 9,800 is going to be open cut and replace, whereas the rest of it's going to be slip lined. They're actually, I do have a number. They're expecting to conserve about 800 acre feet of water a year on this project to begin this fall, and they're hoping to be completed by fall of 2024. This project has a total estimated cost of $3,418,000. This is just one phase of the overall replacement, so that's not the total cost of the project, but it's the total cost of what they're seeking funding for today. Staff recommends the board authorize and commit $2 million as a water conservation grant. And that's it. Any questions on that one?
Thank you, Ben.
I had one question, Ben. So is this open cut next to the railroad that they're doing?
Yeah, it's all right sandwiched right next to the railroad and the highway.
Well, that's all gonna be trench boxed every foot of it then, or the vibrations will collapse it?
I know they've been working with the railroad. They would have to. I'm not sure exactly what they're gonna do, but
Yeah, they're pretty particular if you're gonna.
That's what I've heard.
By the railroad, and that
Yep.
certainly pushes costs up.
yeah,
Well, and the safety concerns, it's, that vibration off from the train creates lots of challenges.
yeah,
Just leave it at that.
I believe that.
All right, Ben, any other questions from board members? Dana or Spencer? Again, this is in the Provo River District, and I don't know if staff intended that Juliette Tennert make these motions, or should we assign it to one of the gentlemen here? Okay. Randy, would you
Sure, be glad to.
handle that one, please? Okay. Next agenda item is Payson City RM 105, and Mr. Tom Cox is the project manager.
So I hope you guys are all worn out now, so I will sail through.
Getting there.
So Payson City, that's in the Provo River districts. You'll have to decide who wants to present it. And it is one of the conservation projects. So Payson City has about 5,300 secondary connections that they started metering in 2019. And so they're just seeking the $2 million reimbursement for a conservation project. And that project is part of a Dry Creek Channel Improvement Project that's being co-funded by the NRCS. NRCS, it's part of their PL 566, their watershed improvement protection project or program. But for some reason, they will not pay for certain types of road crossings. So the NRCS will pay for channel improvements, which include some concrete lining, but they will not pay for 3 road crossings. So the city has to come up with funds for that. They've estimated that the cost of those road crossings plus some channel improvement upstream and downstream is about $2 million. So that's what they're asking for, up to $2 million from the board. That's 100% of that portion of the cost. The timing is a little suspect on this. NRCS likes to take their time. So if the NRCS whole project goes in a timely manner, the project cost for the box culvert will probably be less than $2 million. But if the city's box culvert part can be a standalone project, if that becomes an issue, so they can get that work done before the end of 2026. So that is a viable option for them. So that's what they're asking for, is up to $2 million, 100% part of the non-NRCS paid part of that project. So are there any questions about that one? Okay.
Any questions from board? Hearing none, I guess not. And maybe I'd assign that to Spencer Jones to make that motion, if you will, please, Spencer.
Yes.
Thank you. I can turn the pages. Agenda item number RM 107, Santa Quin City. And we have with us in the briefing meeting, Dan Olson, Mayor, Jason Bond, Assistant City Manager, Jason Callaway, Public Works Director, and John Lundell, City Engineer. And Tom, if you would please make your presentation.
Okay, this is another water conservation type project. The applicant began installing their secondary meters in 2007. So back then, that was the old mechanical type. And over the years, as we all know, those don't work very well in secondary systems because the hard water and draining the systems, the water meters lose their accuracy fairly quickly, and that's the case here. So the applicant has approximately 3,900 meters in their system, but they had installed back then about 2,580 meters. So that's what their request is, grant money to pay to replace those old mechanical meters that are either not working or not very accurate, and also upgrading the system to include a communication tower so they can do the remote reading and gathering the information. So there is an upgrade to the system tied to the project. So the estimated project cost is about $690,000. Just got new glasses and I still can't see. So staff recommends the board authorize and commit 100% of the project cost up to $1,690,000 as a water conservation grant. So any questions about that one?
Thank you, Tom. Any questions from board members on that project? Any comments that the applicants want to make at this time, or would you like to save your comments for the general board meeting?
We're just extra passionate about water conservation.
Very good. Very good. I'd ask Blaine Ibsen if he would please make the motion on that agenda item. Thank you, Blaine. Our next agenda item is Eden Water Works Company, RE 470. Board member is Kyle Stevens and project manager is Mr. Tom Cox. Tom, if you will, please.
It's like you just mentioned, it's in Kyle's area, so someone will need to do that motion for him. The Eden Waterworks Company, their water system, the oldest pipes were installed about in the 1960s, and a lot of them consisted of 4-inch diameter pipes, which are, because of the growth, they're undersized. They cannot provide sufficient fire suppression flow, and they have trouble providing water to the lower part of their water system, the way things are set up. So the company's here requesting authorization and committal of their funding for their project. So the estimated project cost is $2 million. So staff recommends the board authorize and commit 85% of the project cost up to $1,700,000. That the project be purchased at 1% interest over 30 years with annual payments of approximately $65,900. So maybe a comment about how we come up with those terms. The affordability guideline for the area is $94 per connection per month. If you look at the chart in the financial feasibility section, it shows that they pay about $65 per month for culinary water, and a weighted average for their secondary water assessment is $29 per connection per month. So just adding those together, you're already over or at their affordability guidelines. So you throw in the board's proposed loan payment, and that puts them even farther above their guidelines. That's why we give them the lower interest rate and the extended years. Any questions about that one?
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom on this project? I'd like to assign that to Dana Van Horn. If you will, please, Dana, make that motion.
Be happy to.
You have any questions specifically to that, or are you ready to go? Dana?
I think so. No, sorry. I was just
Okay.
putting my camera on so you could see my face.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Be the end of the line?
Well, the end of the projects.
End of the project?
Got one new application, but.
All right. Gee. Huh. There. We have one new application from Woodland South Hills Irrigation Company to be discussed at future board meeting. And let's see, we're moving on to secondary metering, ARPA funding, prioritization. Marisa Egbert again. If you will, please.
Morning. So this is just to go over what we have discussed in a couple of meetings about the additional funds. So the remaining funds are about 41 million. At the last board meeting, we showed you the spreadsheet we came up with Shalane, Joel, and I initially worked on that. Juliette helped out on that as well, to come up with the prioritization, the rankings. And so the board at that time did not make a motion on the process. And so asking for a little more time to review that. We sent that out to all of you, the spreadsheet that we had that has all the explanations of where we went through our process. And then we heard back from, I think, just about everyone on the board, every board member over email that they were comfortable with the process and understood. And so now is just the time where we're asking now for an actual motion on the process that we're doing, and then the amounts that have come out there in that spreadsheet are what we will use for the future when we bring those projects to you, those applications to you. These are all applicants that have already received funds. They're receiving additional funds. They're separate, one's from the $200 million pot, and the other one's from the $50 million pot. They will have separate project numbers. Even though it's the same applicant, it'll have separate project numbers, new contracts and all that, not amendments. So just to make you aware of how we're doing that process also. But this is just a process, the board making a motion on the process. What are the, I don't have it with me, sorry. There's 3 things on that motion. No, there are. Remember, is it just okay, yeah. And so right now we're looking at $41 million is what is left that has not been allocated out of the full $250 million. So I don't know if there's any other questions or.
Any questions for Marisa on that spreadsheet that we attempted to digest?
So do you need a motion on this one?
Yes, we will.
Yes.
Will we want specific language on the motion?
It should be
Oh.
there. Yeah.
There, bottom of the page, right there.
Oh, yes, there it is.
And to
Such a
clarify.
short underline.
Yeah. To clarify, this is approval of the process. You're not approving the amounts right now. Those are something that we will come back to the board as a regular project and present it and use those amounts.
We're just approving the criteria.
Yes, the process that we came up for the ranking and prioritization to try to do what we could to follow the statute.
All right, and Randy Crozier will make that motion. So, thank you, Marisa. Oh, next agenda item is Landscape Conservation Incentive Program Report. Shelby Erickson.
All right, good morning. So I put together this just summary report that's included in your packet, just going over the background, implementation, and also just looking forward on the landscape incentives program. A couple key things. We are currently updating our administrative rules for the program. It's in the public comment period that will be finishing up the last day of this month. So we anticipate that the new rules will be in place by probably next week or so. And then I just have a short presentation, just a few slides where I'll just touch on background, ordinances, implementation, a site walkthrough so you can see what the website looks like, and then also just how it's going along with some statistics of what we've seen so far in terms of applications and some grass removal stats from Southern Utah. Do you have any questions or anything specifically you'd like me to address?
I don't know, Shelby. I guess you'll present it in general board meeting. I guess I'm curious. There seems to be a lot of criticism of turf and not much of trees. And in my life, I think trees drink a lot of water too. But I don't know how you address that specifically. But I'll be happy to hear it in general board meeting if
Okay.
you're
Yeah, good
don't want to
questions.
address it now.
Yeah, no, we're still big fans of trees and the shade and the drop in temperature that they can provide. So we encourage trees, we encourage plant coverage. There are plant coverage requirements to make sure that we're not just putting in hot, rocks, dry landscapes, but that we still have variety and plant coverage to help with the heat island effect. But there's still the water savings associated with replacing that grass. So,
Okay.
awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, that takes us to the director's report, unless you want to save that for the general meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I was just going to say, in the interest of time, I think I'll hold off for the regular board meeting. And then we just have a couple of items for information from the board, and then we'll get you guys to lunch.
All right, let's have those general information items in, please, Madam Director.
Shalane, do you want to give a quick update on the status of funds if you want, and then also the capital asset management plan rules?
Yes, and I will be brief. The status of funds, I just want to point out, there's one spot I probably should have fixed, but want to point out that the fiscal year is actually ending tomorrow. We have a new one starting on Saturday. So starting right off the bat on revolving construction fund, it looks like we actually got those dam safety grant amendments that were committed at the last meeting. We got them contracted, but the funding isn't available until Saturday. We aren't spending it yet. So just so you know, even though it looks like we're in the hole, we're really not. We just wanted to make sure we got those contracted, so we're ready to go when the funding does become available. And as the projects move forward, we have that in place. Again, city's water loan fund every time, no change. We've got to find some projects that we can put in that fund and get those funds spent. You can see the C&D fund continues to move along. I think I noted that we had another 5 million contracted since the last board meeting. And you can see there's several committals marked with an asterisk that you'll be considering today, those secondary meter loan funds, the Eden project, all new committals that'll be ready to move forward with contracting. We did get some of those small system secondary grants contracted, and ARPA just keeps rolling. That's our multi-page fund now with so much money and so many applicants. But I did add, now we have a new page, and this is the place I probably should have fixed, where it says funds available for projects this fiscal year. They're not actually. That 18 million for those water conservation grants doesn't actually become available until Saturday. So by presenting them here today, we won't get them contracted in a day. So we won't spend anything before it's actually available. But I did add that page so you can see the total there of those 10 projects that are being presented do add up to just under the 18 million that was appropriated for them. And the one new application, fairly small, will come from the revolving fund. So are there any questions on the status of funds?
Not for me. Board members, do you have questions for Shalane?
Okay, hearing none, I will move on. Blaine was the only one that pointed this out via email, and I should have put it in my email to all of you. I had told you last meeting I'd have, after soliciting comments on the capital asset management plan rules, that I'd have them ready for you to adopt today, and I don't. And the reason is, with some of the substantive comments that we received from a couple of those districts that are concerned about the cost of what this could take and the length of time it could take, and the comment from Dana of it would be helpful to have a definition of and I can't remember exactly what it's written in the rules, but an engineer evaluation, something to that effect. I need a little more time to confer with our attorney, Marty, and possibly executive staff about incorporating some of those comments or consideration. I think the law is pretty clear about a plan has to be in place before they seek funding, so I don't think we can offer leeway to include that as part of a project cost, but trying to consider the comments that were made from some of those smaller districts. So hopefully next time. Any questions on that? No.
Hearing none, I
Okay.
think we're good, Shalane.
Thank you.
Okay, just a couple other quick items, and I want to talk about the August board meeting, and Marisa, I had you down to come. As part of the August board meeting, we had discussed about doing a tour as well in the Bear River district, and Marisa, you have some information about that.
When we first started talking about being up in Bear River, we talked about being up in the Bear Lake area, particularly Stewart Dam. We do have the green light to be able to have a tour at Stewart Dam. When we first started talking with Shannon, I was like, she said, we're not going to be able to stay up there. We're going to have to stay in Logan because of the timing. And then Charlie brought that up. Hey, we're not going to be able to stay up there. We're going to have to stay in Logan. And then Conley brought it up. Between the crowds and the accommodations, which it's fine if we stay in Logan. We can do that. We do lose a lot of time in the day at that point, trying to get a bus up the canyon and get us going. So that begs the question if we want to change the board tour to the day before the October board meeting rather than the August. I don't know if Candace might have an important birthday party. And certainly we need to check with Juliette as well, and Kyle. So we just thought we'd check about that. There is the concern come October 4th, is the weather gonna present an issue? There's always that. Charlie, there's no elevators involved, right?
Yeah, Marisa, I think the last time we had an October tour, the weather was wonderful. That doesn't mean that'll happen twice in a century.
That was down south.
Yeah, and Bear Lake Valley can be pretty nice in October. The problem with August, as talking to people, is you can stay in Montpelier, and the person I talked to didn't recommend Montpelier motels. So
it is October 5th is our next board, or our October board meeting. So it is earlier.
Yeah.
And we can definitely make that work if that's.
So it'd be
the
October
choice of the board.
4th.
It'd be the 4th, yes.
This is, part of it is easier on the accommodations. We believe we have not, I don't think we've checked into it. We believe we'd be able to find a place to stay up there at that time. I mean, this is when it's residential time, Utah residents time up there. And the crowds are gone. And that definitely can be an issue, just navigating through Garden City. So what are thoughts?
yeah, and I don't know what communication Maurice's had with the Pacific Corp folks,
Not,
but
I haven't had a voice until today, so.
yeah, but Bear Lake Valley in the fall has been pretty kind on the tours I've been on. They've been in September-ish rather than October, but there are some interesting things going on presently in the Bear Lake Valley with regard to Bear River and distribution for irrigation and power generation and possible impacts to things like Great Salt Lake. So
I would say October 4th is September-ish.
Yeah?
So it really depends on everyone's, because the board did look at the calendar back in October and said yes to and so it'd be a matter of everyone's schedules. And this tends to be a group that has a lot going on in their lives.
Maybe, Mr. Vice Chair, if I may recommend, since we're missing a few of the board members, we could send out an email to confirm if the availability, if that's the desire of the board to look at a different date.
And Candace said something about boats at one time. And so I think there's less boats in October on the lake and more available.
Blaine, Randy, you're here. What are your thoughts?
Well, October can be beautiful and it can be ugly. I just commented October can be beautiful and it can be ugly too. But I don't care when you said it, there's going to be conflicts, and so I'm fine with October as,
I'm good on October 5th as a board meeting. The 4th, I'm not available, but don't base it on me. I plan on attending the board meeting, but I won't be available on the day before.
Dana and Spencer, what are your thoughts?
October 4th, Spencer, October 4th and 5th are fine for me, so.
Dana?
I don't seem to have an issue, at least that I can think of without looking at my calendar, but the elections got moved to November, the week of Thanksgiving, so
Oh, yes.
freed
I
up.
remember you had an issue with that.
Yeah, and then in Moab City, we didn't have enough applicants for their city council to have a primary, so I should be available for the August meeting as well. So, but as far as going up north, my daughter's actually going to veterinary school in Logan starting in August, so I'll go up there anytime you ask me to. So, because I hopefully can see her. So
I was
that'd
going
be
to say,
great.
you don't want to attend a board meeting virtually, or excuse me, a board tour.
No, not at all. I just have a whole bunch of stuff going on this week, and it was too much to drive up there, so, and back. So I apologize for not being there in person.
Well, we're glad to have
This is
you.
Spencer.
Yes, Spence.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I'm fine with October or August, either one. So I would say whatever everyone else is okay with.
Excellent.
We can get an email out to all the board members and check on that, and would love to have a response back from everyone, which way to go. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marisa. Just a couple other really quick items. We talked a little bit about board members, and I want to give you a status update. So we did get some great applications for our Provo district, and that has moved on to the governor's office. So looking forward to getting that board member filled. And then as part of HB 491, there was a new board member, as we've discussed, that bill gave the Board of Water Resources for a Great Salt Lake interest. So we are working on names to make sure we get some good applicants for that position as well. And then just one other element as part of SB 277 from this last year, it transferred $50 million for each year for the next 4 years from the WIRA, the Water Infrastructure Restricted Account, I can't talk, and to the C&D account for the purposes of project that benefit the Colorado River drainage in Utah, including projects for water reuse, desalination, building of dams, conservation, county and municipality that benefits the project. And they have to do a bunch of different water conservation, have issued a bunch of different water conservation measures as far as requirements for the maximum amount of water that can be used, water efficiency standards, and all of those type of things. We are working on that process because we will need a new application process. Do we think we'll need a new application? I thought we did, or would it go through the regular board? Okay, we're figuring it out. That's where we're at. I just wanted you to know that that we're aware of it and we are working to get that process, and we'll bring it before you guys. So I think I'll leave our remarks there for today.
Thank you, Madam Director. With that, any other discussion for briefing meeting? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn to, or recess to 1 o'clock for our general board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, that is non-debatable, and so we are adjourned till 1 o'clock. Thank you.